Welcome to Distinctly Well. I'm your host, Leo Tonkin. And in each episode, we engage in insightful and distinct conversations with a variety of experts, innovators, thought leaders, and friends, exploring what it truly means to live and be well in all facets of life. Let's explore, learn, and grow together. Welcome to Distinctly Well. Hi, everyone. Leo Tonkin here with Distinctly Well, and I'm real excited about this episode. Got a very special guest who I met actually last year in Tel Aviv is where we first met. I really had a lot of time to get to know each other. We were at the Global Wellness Summit that was happening in Tel Aviv, a great conference. And it led us on a journey in connecting. And just a couple months ago, we were at iSpa, and we were in our area together providing our salt therapy and his music therapy. And we're here really to talk with the guy that really runs Mindstream. That's with a Y, Mindstream. And it's Freddie Moross. Freddie, thank you so much for coming on board.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, all the way from the UK across the pond.
That's it. Dialing in.
Great. So, a lot of what we talk about here is really getting into how do you language what it is that we do? Obviously, from you and I chatting about salt therapy, there's so much that people don't know or what they think they know. Here you are in this unique space called music therapy. Love to hear what you distinguish it as opposed to what a lot of people know is sound therapy. What's that relationship, and how do you define what music therapy is all about?
I appreciate that being the first question. I mean, one of the things that I've always admired about how you speak about your role and salt chamber and salt therapy as an industry is you always put education at the front of all of the conversations. It's about understanding the value it holds and what it is, the very basics all the way through to ensuring that it's something that consumers can really latch onto and businesses can help support as a profession in an industry. Similarly, a lot of my role is spent talking about music, which is good because I love music and it's a fun thing to talk about. But I think, all of us have lived experiences with music, much like everyone has lived experiences with salt. And one of the big distinctions you're constantly making is, wet versus dry salt and what halotherapy is versus, and for me, it's very similar. Everyone has lived experiences being, be it, listening to music in their home lives is, something that they're passionate about, be it Aerosmith through to Lil Wayne. It doesn't matter. People will love certain types of music and they'll respond better to certain types in their personal world. They will have heard, particularly if they have an inclination to be well and to live well and to engage in these practices that we hold dear. They may be more familiar with certain ambient types of music. They may be familiar with more experiential types of music. So sound therapy you reference is something that people have begun to, or I should say begun for thousands of years. They've understood the value of sound therapy, which is often associated with something which is far more experiential, gongs, Tibetan gongs, various different sound bowls. That's what is usually sort of bucketed in with this concept of sound therapy.
So, Freddie, obviously people listen to a variety of music. I remember I grew up playing the drums. I'm a classic rock and roll guy. I'm sure you've got your favorite tunes, especially musicians in the UK and all, which very responsible for a lot of our music. But I think there's a lot of research about how music moves people and how it uses to elicit emotions, whether it's a soundtrack or different moods that you're in. How are you using music intentionally? How does that part of the business, if you will, or therapy evolve?
Defining music therapy, sound therapy, therapeutic music, all these different sorts of terminologies, they all mean different things and have different applications and also different access points. I think that's one of the critical components. It's also understanding what's relevant for where and what do you need in order to implement certain aspects of music. And so sound therapy, which is one of the most well-known within wellness industries, and it's a very ancient, traditional use of sound. So you're talking gongs through to bowls. This is what often are these vibrational sound experiences that are led by an individual or multiple individuals performing collectively. That's really where sound therapy comes in as a core collective. Music therapy is the clinical discipline of music practice. So this is where it's a one-to-one experience where it is almost prescribed. I mean, these are individuals who are incredibly well trained. There's sadly too few of them. I think there's 8,000 in total who are American music therapists, part of the American Music Therapy Association. And I spend a long time talking with Dr. Gooding, who's the president of the AMTA, and talking about the importance of distinguishing what music therapy is versus what therapeutic music is, because they get bucketed together far too often. For instance, we are not a music therapy business. We don't do music therapy. We don't operate with music therapy. Music therapy is the clinical activation of music on you almost treat it like being in a doctor's room. It's a one-to-one experience, and it's often for patients who are in extreme circumstances. They may be comatose, they may be with Alzheimer's, or they may be nonverbal autistic children. That's usually where music therapy often gets operated, and it can be from Dr. Gooding, for instance, I'm sure she won't mind me referencing her personal experiences, but she's worked with 28 weeks gestational age all the way up to 93 years old in terms of patients. So the spectrum of where music can be applied clinically is vast, and there's a lot of evidence base in terms of what you can utilize music for, which is fantastic, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit. But therapeutic music as the final kind of messaging aspect to it, which is really where we fit in. We understand the different aspects of sound therapy and music therapy, but the core difference is that therapeutic music doesn't need an individual in the room. It's always preferable to have someone who's educated about what's being performed and what's coming through the audio sense, to be able to help provide more of a clear environment and educate the guests as well. But it isn't required. And so you can perform therapeutic music, and that's what you would often bucket in as ambient, new age music. The styles of music that you may be sick to death of hearing within the spa could be considered within that bucket. I think what's critical in our role, in order to ensure that you're not sick to death of the music being performed digitally and just you could even call it passive music. That would be sort of the background component, the environmental setter. The reason why we've taken to this so strongly is because we believe that it shouldn't be something that just sits idly in the background. There's schools of thought. There's a great body of literature that us in therapeutic music can learn from, to take in best practices to optimize what you're listening to in a digital environment without an individual one-to-one experience. And as we know, one of the great hurdles of the industry right now is being able to staff. Labor shortages are everywhere. Autonomous therapies are gold dust. Music specifically and audio specifically almost complement nearly every therapeutic intervention that's offered and can become autonomous if programmed correctly. So there's a huge opportunity, if you do it correctly, to really build something special. But it's important to note the distinction between each discipline, as it were, and how they can help aid each other, but they don't necessarily overlap.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating because, over the last 10 years, particularly working in salt room experiences, group experiences, seeing sound baths and gong and a lot of things that you're talking about and people out there. And I think it's a great way to enhance the experience, right? The senses. And then you layer that with the music as a therapy, which I think is phenomenal. And I know you've done a lot of research in it. It's kind of interesting being able to prescribe that. But on the therapeutic side, like salt therapy is not something we diagnose and prescribe. That's not something that we are doing in our country. Some do. And to your point, there's probably a valid place where you're actually prescribing people music, which is really interesting to dive into that about. Is that based on frequencies and brain? And you start getting into how that works. And I think there's a lot more awareness now of spas shifting more to wellness, shifting more to experiences, and including all of the senses. And to your point, the spa music has always been in the background. It's been the CD or, obviously there's licensing rights that some have had issues to figure out, or using apps and doing those types of things, which some are great stuff. I remember using some of the apps that have come out and still come out. How is it that you see music being applied in that spa, wellness, biohacking kind of era that's evolving?
I think the big change that I hope happens within the industry is currently music is seen as a cost center, and one which usually isn't an investable cost center. So my training is as a chartered accountant, so excuse me if I go into the financials of it, but you're never building your balance sheet by investing in music. That's kind of what the perception has been.
Yeah.
Where I would like to shift that is actually it is an investable asset class. You have the ability, if you utilize audio correctly, to not only create product improvements and experiential improvements, you can also utilize it as a brand device. So something that can really enhance your brand values. Audio branding is an incredibly exciting field, one which has been done extremely well in other industries, very rarely within wellness, hospitality, experience-driven industries.
Are you referring to in the retail environment where they're using intentional type music that's being played, or in other aspects?
Different. So
different.
Absolutely. In the perfect scenario, yes. And certainly consumer psychology and consumer behavioral psychology comes into play in terms of the retail side of things and what you're playlisting in order to enhance certain behaviors. So, for instance, casinos do this really, really well. It's utilizing the right audio in the right moment in order to ensure that people stay on the casino floor in the gaming lobby for as long as possible. And that is essentially low. They take out the highs and lows, so there's very little dynamic change. It's very consistent, and it improves focus, and it reduces moments of lapsed sort of desirability to get up and go, and it keeps you really there. Conversely, in a bar, I'm sure many listeners would have experienced walking into a very loud bar where music is pumping, and the first thing you do is go buy a drink. The reason is because you can't sit there and start getting comfortable speaking and chatting around. You want to almost break the tension that's created by the audio and purchase. That is absolutely an intentional decision. The decibel levels are set at exactly the right level, and it creates a consumer behavior. So retail do it very well. Now that's slightly different to audio branding. That's creating a very strong audio experience. Essentially, it's an audio experience. Audio branding would be something like that's a sonic logo. That is something which immediately you're taken to a place of, I know what that brand is, and I'm gonna infuriate some listeners here by not telling you what that brand is. So if you haven't got it, I'm
rewind.
So sorry. But I'm gonna do that on purpose and infuriate. But no, so that would be an example of a sonic mnemonic or a sonic logo, as you call it. Now you can do a lot of different things. You can create different motifs, which can be a little bit longer. So 30 seconds instead of it just being a 5-note melody that's almost encompasses a brand. I mean, and that can be deployed in different places. So an example of someone who's done really great work with sonic moments, as it were. If you're a MacBook user, you're probably very familiar with the startup noise. That immediately as soon as you hear it, you'll think MacBook, because it's deployed perfectly, and you know exactly what it is. You'll find similar with if you start listening to the beautiful noises of a Disney film when the motion picture starts and you see the castle come in. That soundtrack motif, that's a 30-second motif to go over a logo sequence. That audio can be disassociated with the visuals, and you can still experience that brand. And what that is creating additional brand recall. It is a brand identity, an example of where it pays back. And when I mention it's been done well in other industries, Coca-Cola, unbelievable marketing agent. They know exactly what they're doing, and they have done it very well for a very long time. A long time ago now, but in 2010 they did the World Cup song, and so they created their motif, which is da 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 da. So that's Coca-Cola's sonic logo. And then Kanan, who's an artist for the South African World Cup. This is the football World Cup, or soccer World Cup, for the audience, but football World Cup. Kanan wrote the song, which was da 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 da, and that was called Wave and
Right.
Flag, right? And so it embedded Coca-Cola's logo within the track itself. It was then distributed globally as part of the World Cup campaign. They found that quarter over quarter, directly as a result of that sonic activation, their sales increased by 5%, which is in Coca-Cola numbers,
Right.
very, very
Very
large.
big.
That's direct sales. But the thing which is exciting about music is you can have indirect sales. So you generate royalties. Every time there's a stream, there's a royalty there. And what Coke did is they took a net share of the royalties generated from that track. So they had a fresh royalty line that was an annuity, and it's paying back to them today. So we're 13 years on today. If you go stream Wave and Flag by Kanan, you're currently giving a little bit of ROI back to Coca-Cola for an investment that was very well made in the music and audio. And the final thing which they managed to do, which again is just genius within their industry, but is absolutely applicable to ours, is they remixed or reworked the Kanan Wave and Flag song in 18 different countries in 18 different
Right.
versions. So
Right.
all of a sudden you had cultural resonance to different territories that meant that they had this authenticity as a brand because they were actually going the extra mile to speak
Right.
to that particular audience. So when you think of
Right.
how many branded locations there are who have spas across
Right.
different territories, if you have a spa in Mexico or the UK, you could have the same core motifs, if you want to call it that, or notes or melodies or whatever you want to call them. And you could apply them in the native instrumentation to a certain region and create a really authentic feel to it whilst making sure there's brand consistency. So when you talk about audio being done well, and why I say it shouldn't be seen as a cost center, if done properly, it's an investable asset class. There is an
Sure.
upfront investment for creating those motifs. There is
Yeah.
a creation cost for this, but
Yeah.
what it does is it creates a long-term payback where you can create brand extension because it's essentially an additional element to your visual brand guidelines. You can create improved product experiences because if you're doing a soundtrack, you do it for the specific thing that you're looking to do. So if you have a signature treatment, a massage or whatever it may be that you really want to try and get that extra mile, say it's a $300 signature hour-long massage, all of a sudden if you put a soundtrack to it that perfectly accompanies the aromatherapy that you're using, if it perfectly accompanies the environment, the ambiance, all of a sudden maybe you charge $3 or $5 or $10 for use of a bespoke soundtrack. And that's a direct revenue uptick as a result of using a bespoke audio soundtrack. You also make a memorable experience. It's something that is digitally available, so can be gifted. It can be gifted
Right.
to the person to take away with them. That will always make them think of your particular spa and spa experience. And then finally, the holy grail of it all is it can create a new revenue line because you can generate net receipts from the royalties earned from streaming this stuff. So I can utilize my 6.5 million subscriber base on YouTube within ambient music, and I can
Right.
push that track out to that particular audience, as well as also our audiences in Spotify and Amazon and
Right.
Apple and all the other major streamers. And that's free marketing, but also it earns every time someone clicks on it. So it's a really nice little neat system,
Interesting.
but it requires a bit of strategy up front.
Interesting. Well, and as you know, in the spa and wellness industry, well, you do have global hospitality companies, right? And they're always looking at branding and moving towards wellness. Obviously this conversation fits from that level of what, let's say a Hilton organization or a Marriott organization or some of the organizations out there. Is that part of their brand strategy? Right. So that I get that. And then now you take it down to, let's say, the spa experience where there may be that branding sound, but it seems that you could utilize music for different types of experiences. For example, a lot of people that go into a salt room or let's say in our wellness suite, they're lying down, they're doing breath work, they're focused on respiratory and breathing. They want to take a time out mentally. How do you design that kind of music to create those branding opportunities as well?
Yeah. And it comes down to the understanding of, do you want to create a brand experience or do you want to create a product experience? You can get right into the nitty gritty and you can create audio for anything and make it bespoke and better if you use very high quality composers. Like we could call up a composer right now and he could score our chat, and I can promise you it will get more dramatic. a little bit more tense, maybe a bit more levity and fun in particular moments. It would improve just our individual phone call. But if you then apply that to an experience where there's a journey in it, I mean, that's where music does its best work. When you have a journey and have something which is wanting immersion, because music plays really well with others. That's the beauty of music. It's not, I mean, you can have it in isolation, which is great. But for me, I always want to try and push towards multi-sensory immersive experiences, because that's when music is really heightened. I should mention our background is, we're new kids on the block within wellness. This is why I often talk about these ideas of, other industries, is because our background is in film and TV and advertising and gaming. And, you know, we're the largest independent provider of music for these forms of media. And over 25 years, we built up and that's not under Mindstream, by the way, that's under a company called Cutting Edge Group. If you want to look them up, we did John Wick 4 recently, all the John Wick franchise, and Stranger Things and Bridgerton, like a whole bunch of high profile IP. Grammy
Award.
Yeah, we've had a few Grammys, we've had a few Oscars, and we've had a few BAFTAs. We've been in the industry for a long time, and thankfully we've received some incredible recognition as a result of the work we've done. But you know, the reason being because we get to work with some unbelievably high quality, talented composers. You know, that's what it comes down to. If you have a very strong composer and you have a very good supervisor, like for instance, Stranger Things 4, right? We had an unbelievable hit with one of the placements of a track on Stranger Things 4. We placed Kate Bush's "Running Up That Hill" on one of the climactic scenes within the season. We didn't write that song. Clearly, Kate Bush did a great job writing it. It was as good a song back when she wrote it. I think it was in the 80s as it is today. But what we did relatively well, which is why we like posting about it every now and again, is we found a sort of an equivalent moment in time within this series where it spoke to a lot of the same feelings that track spoke to back when it was released generationally. Back in the 80s, but 4 decades later, there's a new audience who aren't as familiar with Kate Bush, who are watching Stranger Things 4, who could be introduced to that track and who could then take it on and have a life of its own. And what happened is, you know, because it was such a climactic moment and because the track fit so well and there was a lot of luck, people grasped onto that, and it ended up having this viral TikTok success and moment. Kate ended up touring again. You know, things went really well, but the beauty of that particular case study for us is it showcases what the power of good intentional audio can be, because intention is the word. That's the absolute key word for everything we do, and that applies from within media through to within hospitality and wellness. In media, it's simple because you're operating off of a briefing note, be it the creative director or the actual director or producer of a movie. It's very clear what the scene is looking to achieve. You have, a certain duration. You can see the visuals more often than not. And then you create music in a professionalized structure. That's very, very obvious and delivers value, time and time again. But within hospitality and wellness, that blueprint doesn't exist. This is a much less, whilst music is still pervasively utilized, there doesn't have the professional backbone to create highly curated, professional and intentional music is much less established. And so for us, we want to try and provide the things we managed to build on the media side, and we want to leverage all of that to then deliver the same level of optimal value within wellness.
Yeah, well, that's what, I loved when you and I first met and talking about this, as well as the possibilities, right? You just can see so much. I'm sure many of the people listening to this, where they're wondering, the music that they play, is it intentional? Was it designed? Is it part of a mood or a feeling, and the different modalities? And then you start almost composing, if you will, this layered experience of being taken care of, whether it's a touchless service, whether it's being escorted. I mean, from the moment you check in a hotel to walking into the room, why is it quiet? Why isn't some music playing on something that is creating a mood? You could totally be that music engineer for that, right?
Yeah, you can be. And I also, I'm very aware that when you start looking at anything in that level of detail, it gets daunting, So to be a spa director in this moment of time and then be told, well, it's not good enough anymore just to play the same CDs over and over again, or it's not good enough anymore to have, a Spotify playlist on your phone. We won't even get into the licensing stuff because that's a surefire way to get a lot of turnoffs on this podcast. It'll get very dry very quick. But if the industry turns to say, look, now we expect you to craft a whole designed audio journey for your guests from when they walk in the building through to when they're having their pre-treatment, the post-treatment, during the treatment, the post-treatment, the follow-up thereafter, all the audio touch points, make sure that they perfectly fit all of the other things you've taken painstaking care to design and create and build. It's a lot. It's daunting. It's a large task. Yeah. And so for us, we want to offer the opportunity to outsource that. Whilst I know a lot of people bring their own, it's easy to put on a Spotify playlist. Let me preface it by saying that it's easy to put on a Spotify playlist. The problem is, you don't necessarily know if it's the right playlist for a particular moment. When we were doing a lot of research to get ourselves in this, we spent time speaking to people who do these treatments, from the therapists themselves to the directors to the individual guests and so on and so forth, just market mapping. And I can't tell you how many people have had a bad audio experience, and this is where it's actually this has had a negative impact on their experience within a treatment, i.e. they're listening to a playlist and then all of a sudden a techno trap pops up, or all of a sudden one of the examples was there was a spa in the Midwest in the US, and the director there mentioned that in the middle of a treatment, on a normal Spotify playlist that was intended for this particular type of purpose, a horror track played from a film, literally started with just a blood-curdling scream. So if you can imagine you're peacefully drifting off in a beautiful massage that you've paid a not too small a sum for, and then you get woken up to a blood-curdling scream. It's not the best experience. And so one of the things is reliability, making sure you have a trusted expert in the room who you can know with confidence is going to program everything exactly as you require it. Most platforms aren't intentional in terms of just doing this for spa and for wellness. So, it's a risk if you go elsewhere outside of all the licensing stuff.
Well, I mean, forget about all the licensing stuff. I get that. And, I know the facilities that we've worked with over the years, they have, they might have speakers in their salt room. Some do unique devices. Some are getting more towards what you're talking about. Are they making an intentional choice on how to use sound or music therapy in that regard? And when you start looking at how it has been used, I know that you guys did some studies on how some of your music helps people with sleep. So much of the issue is sleep. And just like I think there could be so much, what if there's music for respiratory? So when you're in that environment or you're doing breath work and you're getting salted, that's what kind of attracted me to this conversation as well. Because it's really about creating those experiences and designing them and put some intention to it. And that I think it's also where I think more personalization comes from, where if you can give your guest a choice, whether they're mood based or they're this based, that's, I see where part of this is going as well.
Absolutely. And I would say for me, intention means, within this field, intention means two things. It's understanding the art and it's understanding the science. And the two have to be intertwined, because unlike the media business, our kind of where we come from, this music isn't just entertainment. No one's putting on our music specifically to feel entertained and engaged. It's a utility. It's a specific tool that they're relying upon to elicit a particular physiological health and wellness outcome. And so there's a responsibility not just to bring the highest quality talent to create that form of music, so a very high quality composer, but you have to also guide that composer with the latest information that is available, the research, the science, working with experts to ensure that whatever they're doing is optimized to improve outcome, because that's the critical component. And I must say, whilst we do understand a fair bit, a lot of it is still very under-researched. The actual linking of particular components of music. I mean, there are so many buzzwords that people will be familiar with: binaural beats, vibroacoustics, frequency-based music, pitch, tonal therapies. there's so much out there that people will have been made aware of because it's been written up in blogs. And certainly there is some underlying research, often in terms of the sort of initial value, the underlying value. Yep. But often what's really not understood is the actual delivery of that kind of different music. When is it functional? When does binaural beats apply versus pitch-based, therapy-based music, or frequency-based music? At what point do you utilize one as opposed to the other? And I think the literature needs to be built up. There needs to be many more studies. It's also about outcomes and trying to achieve different outcomes. So, for instance, you reference sleep. It's a huge priority of ours, sleep, because 4 billion people wake up tired every day, and music is one of the tools that they seek out, usually off of personal platforms like Spotify or YouTube. They just Google it and they end up coming across a playlist and they put it on. And our question was, well, who's making sure they find the right stuff? How do we know that whoever, Joe Blogs, who can't sleep in the middle of the night and is stressed out of their mind with a variety of problems they're bringing to it, and they're seeking a specific playlist, or seeking a specific solution, and they end up finding a random sleep playlist from a random YouTube channel, sometimes ours, because we have a pretty significant YouTube presence. So we want to know, well, why are they finding our music at that point? Is it the right thing for them? How can we make sure that we are being the best partner possible to YouTube, to Joe Blogs, to make sure that everything matches up? So we partnered with Sleep Score Labs, which is a gold standard sleep laboratory based out of San Diego. And we started our first study in a series of studies that we're going to be doing with them, which we just got the results back, just to kind of set the benchmark of, okay, well, is music good versus not good when it comes to sleep? Thankfully, it is good. So I can say that with some confidence now. We're being published in a paper coming up soon.
That's
so
great.
You'll be able to read the results yourself. But it's, all aspects of sleep architecture can be improved. But when you get into the nitty gritty, you realize actually there's a lot to be tested. So yes, music is good, but how do we deliver that? We delivered it in this particular study with a speaker by the bed. Is it better with those earbuds that you may have seen on the shelves with Bose, or is it better with a speaker in the room? If there's a speaker in the room, is it worse if you have a partner in the bed, or versus not? And then you can go, and then it's sort of like, well, okay, well, when are you delivering it? Is it throughout the whole night? Is it 20 minutes of prescribed sleep music before you go to bed? Did we account for preference? You may be, as you say, a rocker and a drummer. I may be a house guy. Is there preference to it, as well? And do we need
I want the answer. Everybody wants that answer though, right now. You know that, right? Everyone's trying to figure it out. They're saying to myself, like I say, hey, Siri, play this list out loud or whatnot. Which one? It's fascinating though, that you can dial it in, that you can get it to that level of a distinction, right? When you can, like people can, wine. There's certain distinctions you have in wine. When you get into the distinctions of music and how it can be applied, that richness that I hear in your voice and the passion behind it can be applied so many places. So here you have sleep and you provide the evidence and it works and it's validated. And then you hear, I know you're interested in the breath work and, in respiratory health. And you look at, wow, what if the type of music you listen to makes that kind of difference in your life?
And unfortunately, breathwork, again, another critically under-researched area in terms of the soundtrack. Now, we know over the course of the last 3.5 years, breathwork has been exploding. And there has been some incredible research that showcases the value that underpins what a lot of people already knew, particularly in the industry, because they've experienced breathwork and it's been around for a very long time. But sometimes you need that, and you should have that evidence base when that tool becomes something that is utilized as part of global routines in order to improve and reduce, the preventable diseases that we are all trying to remove from our livelihood. But one aspect which isn't researched very well within breathwork right now, and one thing we want to change is audio, because audio accompanies a lot of this breath, and it can be a critical component of the experience. And people tend to use a track that they think might work, and you know what? It may work. And I also don't discount that, because what I would say is, and I agree, everyone wants to know the answers today. Unfortunately, that's not how the science works. It's not how the research works. And we have to, all bend the knee to good due process, because that's how you get the right result. But that doesn't mean you can't experience things that improve now. Like I can tell you, a lot of the work we do on the media side is very much not evidence-based. It's all intuition. It's all artistry. Doesn't mean it's not very good. It's all fantastic work, and it really sort of hits the note on the head because it's professional and it's with the highest quality of composition, and it really fits the moment. You know, some of our ambient composers, I'll reference one of our artists, Peter Cater, 14-time Grammy nominee, 2-time Grammy winner. He's a phenomenal musician, also extremely interested in breath, has done a lot of classes himself, is constantly looking at creating and becoming the go-to source for music within breath. Now, does it mean we shouldn't use Peter's music until we've got the paper in hand that says, right, in this sample size, it is unequivocally, it makes this particular quantifiable difference? No, I believe that we should start pitching it today. The important thing is not to make claims. That's where I really want to put my flag in the ground. Is I have every ambition for Mindstream particularly, and all of our artists on Mindstream, to create with care, to be evidence-based, and to really take the research as a critical component. But we have to be cognizant of where we are today, and what I'll bring to the table today is the highest quality music that you will hear in the space, because I can promise that. That's a claim I can make. You can partner with me because of the great stuff that we have in our catalog, and because of the future vision to understand what that catalog could become, and to develop the future of music as in this particular field. And I really want to also you can probably put too fine a point on it, but it's in this field where music is a utility and not just art, because it's really distinct in this particular field where music is a utility to elicit certain health and well-being outcomes. I personally believe it needs to be co-created with expertise within research and science. And that takes time. That takes years of studies and building up off the base that we have. Thankfully, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. There's a lot of intuition. There's a lot of artistry that can help us along the way. And what I would say to anyone who asks, why use music in this way? Because we can tell with 80% certainty, let's say, that's a finger in the air number, so please don't quote me on it, but we could say confidently it helps, because we've all experienced that moment within our lives where music has changed a mood, or you put on a playlist and felt those feelings more deeply, or whatever it may be. So we know that there's power to music. And then there's evidence that showcases that is correct in particular communities like Alzheimer's. Very well researched, the value music can bring, particularly in terms of memory retention and sort of unlocking a particular phase of life. Autistic children, nonverbal autistic children, blind communities, other areas where music has been very well researched and tested. And when I don't want to extrapolate across a mass market from studies which we don't have the clear parameters for to discuss today, but what you can begin to infer is, okay, well, if music has these different powers in high impact communities, we know that it could make a big difference within this field, particularly when we see the comparables in a less researched industry like advertising, like media, like entertainment, where music's used really, really well. And so when you have that kind of Venn diagram and you see hospitality where it's, I'm just going to put a CD on for now, my argument would be we could do that so much better today without any evidence based. But let me also bring the evidence base in, because then you can upsell and I can be reliant upon the data, the information as well. So it's sort of it's foundations and then building.
Well, it would seem too, you start looking at other markets. That's what I always get intrigued about with the salt therapy business as an aside. It just contributes to so many people in so many ways. And you just look at music in senior living facilities, for example. What's the kind of, when I'm getting older, man. And when you're getting older, your music is that connection too. We go to, my wife and I, we just went to, we just saw the Goo Goo Dolls last week. And, there's music, and then we go old school back to Ambrosia that was playing in a little place. And there is that connection. And I think in the hospitality, spa, wellness, I think that's a lot of what some of the owners and the spa people are looking for, because people go to their location, their facility. They want to feel connected. And if music can help bring that connection to that, and there's a benefit to it, right? And then that's what's real exciting about all this kind of stuff, you know?
Well, as a simple anecdote for me, you say Goo Goo Dolls, I immediately smile and I'm thinking I saw them at the Greek, 15 years ago now. And I met a girl at the Greek at that time and I was like, this was really exciting. And you just put my head right back into that moment of being like, young and excited and all that kind of stuff. That's the power of music. We can just connect over a shared love of a band, which is great. And shared love of our own individual experiences. You could do it collectively, but we can also do it individually. We both experienced the Goo Goo Dolls in different moments. Yeah. And importantly, we both individually went to the places where we experienced them. So now, instead of speaking about Goo Goo Dolls, let's imagine that's about a spa experience where the music was really intentionally designed. It was unique. It was cool. It was fantastic. What an incredible memory device. What a way to try and get a repeat customer back, because you have something that is social bonding. It has intrinsic memory properties and you can utilize it without bombarding people with visual marketing, which is constant. It's a unique way of creating community, authentic, experiential improvements. And so it becomes a fantastic recall proposition if done in a way that is exciting and interesting, like the Goo Goo Dolls managed to do every time they perform, of course.
People are wondering, what is your go-to playlist now? We all have our playlist for different things. So it is interesting when you look at the genres and generations and, my grandkids and what they're going to be exposed to and what music, pops grew up with. And it's interesting. It is that connecting thing for us. It's been written since the day of time, man. Made sounds. And,
interestingly enough, sound and music was originally formed as a social bonding tool. That's, we started chanting to each other and connecting over music and sound well before language developed fully, and then language developed, and then music kind of it forked a little bit. It became an art form, it became entertainment, it became commoditized, and now it became very commercial, and that's great, and it's still got those core intrinsic social mechanisms. But when you think back to the roots of where music came from, the chronology of it, and it's a fascinating tool that people know about. They understand it to some degree. They've experienced it. Yeah, they don't tend to think about it at the top of mind when they think of things that could really change a moment or really change an experience. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek because actually there is a whole host of people personally, particularly younger generations like Gen Z, who already utilize music as a tool for mental health, for instance. They understand that it's something they can rely upon for that particular moment. But particularly in enterprise and B2B where you're curating experiences, it's less well delivered. But to answer your question, because in terms of what my go-to playlist is, I was presented with that problem recently when I had I recently had my first child. I have a 4-month-old daughter.
That's right.
So I had to figure out here's a fresh new human who has no cultural reference points at all. And I get to now completely curate for at least the first few years until she stops listening to me, completely curate her, her introduction into music and art and all this sort of stuff. And what a great and exciting challenge. So I started creating my own playlist for her and took her through the different decades. And, it became a way for me to bond with my daughter in a way which made me feel really close to her, particularly in those tough first few weeks where I felt like a useless cog on the side, just trying to sort of run off my wife, do whatever I was told. But it's a wonderful moment.
I love that you share that and you're so authentic that, people, I love talking with you about that. We can go on forever, but it's kind of like, it is interesting. We get to imprint, we get to make a difference to the people around us, and music and music can be used for well-being in so many ways. And it just so fits that in this conversation that we've been having, that you were able to distinguish these things, because people don't have these distinctions. And when you can distinguish and see it or hear it and, get a different perspective on it, that's what I love about these conversations. But it's interesting. So you're bringing her through all these it's intentional now. So I love that.
That's the word, intention. If nothing else from today, I think that's the word. Anything to do with the senses, I believe, deserves intention. And that's what we try and do every day. It's what I know so many people in this industry, because a lot of the people in this industry are incredibly creative. They care deeply about experience. They've come to this because they understand the value personally as well as professionally. And so, I know that when I start conversations with people who are, across the table, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't want to make a great experience. It's just, just to go back to the start of this conversation, it's just education and time, making sure that it's something that people can do professionally, but more often than not, they just haven't had the tools to do it for a very long time.
Well,
that's exciting.
And they don't know what they don't know. Same with salt therapy. We've had that challenge over the years where you have to educate. It's constant education and creating awareness. And that's a large part about what we're on here for. And people can find out a lot more about Freddie and Mindstream tagged here in the podcast. There's a lot more to go with Freddie. Obviously, this is a great conversation here, and well done, my friend. I really appreciate you coming on board and being on this podcast, and can't wait to continue to collaborate with you on some of the projects that we're working on as well. It's all good.
Cheers there. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us in this episode of Distinctly Well. For all the show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, head over to distinctlywell.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show to never miss an episode, and check out the video version of each episode over on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, live distinctly, live well.